Welcome everyone to the second session for part 107. And this is radio communication procedures. Very important to know, understand, especially if you're listening to the CTAF and airplanes, manned aircraft around the area, know to where you can avoid them.
79, the A320 going to Phoenix, Arizona. Who's a Kilo Ty? Who is it? Cam 8081 heavy, left on Alpha, short of Echo. 808 Bravo Lima, you didn't follow it? 808 Bravo Lima? 808 Bravo Lima, you told us to follow the Embraer. You follow the Embraer? JetBlue 1069.
Hi, and welcome to M0A's video podcast, episode number 6, Uncontrolled Airspace. Today, we're going to go through takeoff and departure procedures for uncontrolled airspace. Also, we're going to go over arrival and landing procedures at uncontrolled airspace. We'll cover radio communications and proper procedures for entering the traffic pattern at an uncontrolled airport. Let's get to it. At airports without an operating control tower, pilots are asked, however not required, to make position reports. Let's go over and listen to proper departure procedure at an uncontrolled airport.
And Ocala traffic, Cessna 512 Romeo, departing runway 36 at Ocala.
As soon as our wheels leave the ground, we enter into the traffic pattern. The first leg of our traffic pattern is called the upwind. A radio call to announce you're in the upwind would sound something like this.
Ocala traffic, Cessna 512 Romeo on the upwind, runway 36, Ocala.
In a standard traffic pattern, turns are always made to the left unless otherwise noted. The next leg would be our left crosswind, and a radio call in the left crosswind would sound like this.
Ocala traffic, Cessna 512 Romeo, left crosswind 36, Ocala.
As we continue our turns to the left, we end up paralleling the runway. This is known as a left downwind.
Ocala traffic, Cessna 512 Romeo, left downwind 36, Ocala.
Typically, we fly the downwind out until we're 45 degrees away from our touchdown point. At that point, we turn base, in this case, left base.
Ocala traffic, Cessna 512 Romeo, train left base, runway 36 at Ocala.
As we turn into the runway, fully configured for landing, we're turning final. Let me be clear, there's no such thing as a left final or a right final. You're just on final.
And Ocala traffic, Cessna 512 Romeo, final 36, Ocala.
Let's take a closer look at how to enter into an airport traffic pattern without an operating control tower. The aim suggests that we enter on a 45-degree entry to a left downwind. As you can see, we've illustrated that here. Our radio call would sound something like this.
And Ocala traffic, Cessna 512 Romeo's 2 miles out on the 45 to left downwind, runway 36 at Ocala.
Now, looking at this screen, you're looking at the runway, and that's runway 36. Add a 0 to that, and it's 360 degrees. Okay, if you go to the opposite end of the runway, that's runway 18. Add a 0 to it, that's 180 degrees, or just due south. So know that the markings on the runway represent the heading. So if this plane comes in and comes in for a landing, runway 36, then he's on a heading of 360 degrees north. So he said he was on a 45-degree angled runway 36. Where would he be located if you're flying south of the runway? You're down the runway down here at the south end of it, and you hear this call, and he is 45 degrees out, going to runway 36. You should know that he's getting ready to come in and land. But also, if he says he's 2 miles out, which way do you look? North, south, east, or west of the airport? So if you're at the south of the airport and you're looking for that aircraft, you're going to be looking to the east, north or northeast for that plane to be able to spot it. So that way you can avoid it. And this is not necessarily just for a test question, but it's part of our risk management to make sure if you are flying near an airport and you hear a plane call out on the CTAP these directions, you got to be able to know where the aircraft is, be able to spot it, and most of all, avoid it. I'll give it to you one more time.
As you can see, we've illustrated that here. Our radio call would sound something like this.
In Ocala traffic, Cessna 512 Romeo's 2 miles out on the 45 to left downwind runway 36 at Ocala.
At this point, we would observe for other traffic and enter on a midfield left downwind and complete our pattern as normal. Now, what do we do if we're not positioned to make a 45 to left downwind as if we're approaching from the east? What happens is we're going to overfly midfield. Now, you want to do this above traffic pattern altitude. I usually like to do it 500 to 1,000 feet above traffic pattern altitude. From there, you would fly the 45 outbound and make a teardrop entry back in to the 45 to left downwind. A radio call to do this would sound something like this.
And Ocala traffic, Cessna 512 Romeo 2 miles to the east, going to overfly the field at 2,000 feet and circle back for the 45 to left downwind runway 36 at Ocala.
Flying in uncontrolled airspace can be a tough task. Hopefully today's lesson has given you a better understanding of it. For all your flight training needs, visit m0a.com. And remember, a good pilot is always learning. See ya.
You're on Bravo. You're short of Victor Alpha. You're being the Iberian.
Any questions about that? Any questions? Just knowing if you're taking off, you're upwind, the next is left crosswind, making a left, left downwind, left base, and then final. There is no left or right final. As you're coming in on your 45 degrees, be able to report you're going to be going to your left downwind, left base, and then final. The only time that you'd make a right is Asheville Airport is a good example of that. Always check your airport directory to see which way to be able to go in. Whatever the airport's closest to you that you'll be working. And then the third was going across the field at around, he said between 500 and 1,000 feet. In this case, I think it was 2,000 feet. 1,000 feet going across center of the runway. And when you went across the center of the runway, that shouldn't interfere with any traffic because that's someone landing and then someone taking off. So in the middle should be fine. Went to the 45 degrees and then left downwind, left base, and then final. If I have a question, I can't really see based on the slide. Somebody have a question? Any questions? Okay, we'll continue. Airport operations.
This tutorial covers airport operations. Each time a pilot operates an aircraft, the flight normally begins and ends at an airport. An airport may be a small sod field or a large complex utilized by air carriers. This chapter examines airport operations, identifies features of an airport complex, and provides information on operating on or in the vicinity of an airport. Types of airports. There are two types of airports, towered and non-towered. These types can be further subdivided to civil airports, airports that are open to the general public, military federal government airports, airports operated by the military, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, or other agents of the federal government, private airports, airports designated for private or restricted use only, not open to the general public. A towered airport has an operating control tower. Air traffic control, ATC, is responsible for providing the safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of air traffic at airports where the type of operations and/or volume of traffic requires such a service. Non-towered airport. A non-towered airport does not have an operating control tower. Two-way radio communications are not required, although it is a good operating practice for pilots to transmit their intentions on the specified frequency for the benefit of other traffic in the area. The key to communicating at an airport without an operating control tower is selection of the correct common frequency. The acronym CTAF, which stands for Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, is synonymous with this program. A CTAF is a frequency designated for the purpose of carrying out airport advisory practices while operating to or from an airport without an operating control tower. The CTAF may be a Universal Integrated Community, UNICOM, Multicom, Flight Service Station, FSS, or tower frequency, and is identified in appropriate aeronautical publications. UNICOM is a non-government air-ground radio communication station which may provide airport information at public use airports where there is no tower or FSS. This figure lists recommended communication procedures. More information on radio communications is discussed later in this tutorial. Sources for airport data. When a pilot flies into a different airport, it is important to review the current data for that airport. This data provides the pilot with information such as communication frequencies, services available, closed runways, or airport construction. Three common sources of information are aeronautical charts, Airport Facility Directory, AFD, and Notices to Airmen, NOTAMs. The AFD provides the most comprehensive information on a given airport. It contains information on airports, heliports, and seaplane bases that are open to the public. The AFD is published in 7 books, which are organized by regions and are revised every 56 days. The AFD is also available digitally at www.naco.faa.gov. This figure contains an excerpt from a directory. For a complete listing of information provided in an AFD and how the information may be decoded, refer to the directory legend sample located in the front of each AFD. Notices to Airmen, NOTAMs. NOTAMs provide the most current information available. They provide time-critical information on airports and changes that affect the national airspace system and are of concern to IFR operations. Prior to any flight, pilots should check for any NOTAMs that could affect their intended flight. Radio communications. Operating in and out of a towered airport, as well as in a good portion of the airspace system, requires that an aircraft have two-way radio communication capability. For this reason, a pilot should be knowledgeable of radio station license requirements and radio communications equipment and procedures. Using proper radio phraseology and procedures contribute to a pilot's ability to operate safely and efficiently in the airspace system. A review of the pilot controller glossary contained in the AIM assists a pilot in the use and understanding of standard terminology. The AIM also contains many examples of radio communications. ICAO has adopted a phonetic alphabet, which should be used in radio communications. When communicating with ATC, pilots should use this alphabet to identify their aircraft. An aeronautical chart is the roadmap for a pilot flying under VFR. The chart provides information which allows pilots to track their position and provides available information which enhances safety. The 3 aeronautical charts used by VFR pilots are sectional, VFR terminal area, and world aeronautical. Sectional charts are the most common charts used by pilots today. The charts have a scale of 1 to 500,000. 1 inch equals 6.86 nautical miles, NM, or approximately 8 statute miles, SM, which allows for more detailed information to be included on the chart. The charts provide an abundance of information, including airport data, navigational aids, airspace, and topography. This figure is an excerpt from the legend of a sectional chart. By referring to the chart legend, a pilot can interpret most of the information on the chart. A pilot should also check the chart for other legend information, which includes air traffic control frequencies and information on airspace. These charts are revised semi-annually, except for some areas outside the conterminous United States, where they are revised annually. Latitude and longitude. The equator is an imaginary circle equidistant from the poles of the Earth. Circles parallel to the equator, lines running east and west, are parallels of latitude. They are used to measure degrees of latitude north or south of the equator. The angular distance from the equator to the pole is 1/4 of a circle, or 90 degrees. The 48 conterminous states of the United States are located between 25 degrees and 49 degrees north latitude. The arrows in this figure labeled latitude point to lines of latitude. Meridians of longitude are drawn from the North Pole to the South Pole and are at right angles to the equator. The prime meridian, which passes through Greenwich, England, is used as the zero line from which measurements are made in degrees east and west to 180 degrees. The 48 conterminous states of the United States are between 67 degrees and 125 degrees west longitude. The arrows in this figure labeled longitude point to lines of longitude. Any specific geographical point can be located by reference to its longitude and latitude. Washington, D.C., for example, is approximately 39 degrees north latitude, 77 degrees west longitude. Variation. Variation is the angle between true north and magnetic north. It is expressed as east variation or west variation, depending on whether magnetic north is to the east or west of true north. The North Magnetic Pole is located close to 71 degrees north latitude, 96 degrees west longitude, and is about 1,300 miles from the geographic or true North Pole, as indicated in this figure. If the Earth were uniformly magnetized, the compass needle would point toward the magnetic north, in which case the variation between true north, as shown by the geographical meridians, and magnetic north, as shown by the magnetic meridians, could be measured at any intersection of the meridians. Actually, the Earth is not uniformly magnetized. In the United States, the needle usually points in the general direction of the magnetic pole, but it may vary in certain geographical localities by many degrees. Consequently, the exact amount of variation at thousands of selected locations in the United States has been carefully determined. The amount and the direction of variation, which change slightly from time to time, are shown on most aeronautical charts as broken magenta lines, called isogonic lines, which connect points of equal magnetic variation. An isogonic chart is shown here. Minor bends and turns in the isogonic and agonic lines are caused by unusual geological conditions affecting magnetic forces in these areas. This tutorial focused on airport operations, both in the air and on the surface. For specific information about an unfamiliar airport, consult the AFD and NOTAMs before flying. For further information regarding procedures discussed in this chapter, refer to 14 CFR Part 91 and the AIM. By adhering to established procedures, both airport operations and safety are enhanced. We hope you learned a lot. Please help us spread the word about Pilot Training System, and we look forward to further servicing your flight training needs.
We're going to talk a little bit more about lat and longs as we get a little bit further into it. Airport operations. We talked about in the coming years, you may be flying your drone into a Class C airspace, maybe Class B, Bravo, who knows. But you need to be familiar with airport operations. It is part of the FAA requirements for the drone pilot, and you'll also be tested on it. Next, we're going to talk about emergency plans and have a plan for an emergency action before the flight. If you're flying a fixed wing pilot, as a fixed wing pilot, and you're flying at 2,000, 3,000 feet, especially a helicopter, you know, you're constantly looking left and right, in front of you and behind you, just in case, you know, an engine goes out or an in-flight emergency is going on. So you're looking, where can I land? Where can I land? And so have that plan, an emergency action before the flight, even a checklist that you can use to be able to go through. Did I, you know, knock off a wire? Did I pull out, unplug a wire accidentally? Did I put it in ADDI mode, which takes it at GPS? Do I need to put it in ADDI mode to be able to fix the problem? So have a course of action, you know, that you can work with as you're doing this. And most of you will develop that as when you purchase your drone and adopt your policy procedures, you'll adopt those. If you need some help with those, please contact me direct and I can get you some samples. But basically, you know, you go outside of the Part 107 regulation to avoid injuries and damage. So if you're flying at 399 feet and a plane is coming below you and you need to go to 500 feet or 600 feet, you can do that. And that is to avoid any type of injury or damage to your aircraft, but most of all, to the aircraft that's manned that's coming in to you. That is not a reportable offense, and not unless that you know, the two aircraft collided. But you can go outside your Part 107 to avoid that injury and damage. But if no damage or injuries occurred, then what I would do, if you had a near miss and you had to avoid another aircraft, what I would do, the who, what, when, and where, I'd write it all down, put it into a report, what bird you were flying, the tail number to it. I would, anybody that was there as a witness, I'd put their name down. If you want to type it or write it, but I would save it, because typically something that comes to you, if it's a court battle for anything, if you're in law enforcement, you know this, it's usually a year, 2 years away. You got to go back and depend on your notes, that cliff notes that you made in order to do that. So just make sure you make a report, hold it, keep it, and then the FAA asks you for anything, you've got it. One thing, and this is just a plug to the AOPA, Aircraft Owner Pilots Association. I'm a member, $150 a year, I think it is, and they have legal staff on the payroll that I can call just in case something like this happened. And if I got to make a report, I'm going to let them look at my report to make sure I'm not, you know, self-incriminating myself or opening myself up for a lawsuit when I shouldn't. So you definitely want to be able to have some advice from an attorney if for some reason you got to make a report into the FAA. But we'll talk more about that in the coming slides. For, you know, reporting under Part 107, if you are meeting the guidelines to report to the FAA, that's got to be done within 10 days. 10 days, that's got to be reported to the FAA. And you can go on their website and we'll cover that in a later slide. But the regulation says that to report any event, one, serious injury to any person or loss of consciousness. Now, you know, that's really irrelevant, that whether or not that was a serious injury or not. So to me, serious injury, it would be if you had to call an ambulance or you had to go to a hospital, get some stitches, that's probably serious. Loss of consciousness, you know, is that really out of conscious, knocked out of conscious, or sort of knocked for a doozy? It's probably going to be reportable if there's any consciousness there. And then two, damage to property. This is key. The cost of repair, including labor and materials, do not exceed $500, or the fair market value of the property does not exceed $500, then it's not reportable. The threshold is $500. An example is, and of course, this does not include your aircraft damage, just as damage to other people's property. So if you've got, you hit a windshield of a car and it costs $200 to replace it, then that is not a reportable offense. If I hit the hood and the windshield and it was $800 or $3,000 in damage, yes, that's a reportable offense. Here's where FAA might try to trip you up on something, and it's the value. It's based on the value of that property. So I've got a 1954 Fiat. I don't even know if they made them in 54. But let's say I got a 1954 Ford Fiat, and that thing is worth $200. And I hit it with a drone. Now the fair market value is $200. I hit it with a drone. I'd bent up the hood. I knocked the windshield out, and it's going to cost $3,000 to fix this $200 car. FAA says that if the fair value, you know, exceeds, you know, $500, then it's reportable. So in this case, that $200 worth value estimated value of the car, $200 for that 1954 Fiat, it would not be a reportable offense. Even if it costs $3,000 to fix it, it goes back to the fair market value. So here is a good example. Your unmanned aircraft damages to property whose fair market value is $200 would cost you $600 to repair. Do you need to report this incident to the FAA? And the answer is no. It's below the market. The car is below market value of $500. So I got ahead of myself, but just make a note if you need to do a screenshot to be able to look at this. Just make sure you record your information. And this is something for either the FAA or you just have an issue and you want to just make sure you got good records. You want to make sure that you copy down your airman's number, registration of the aircraft, location, date, time, the persons involved, any property damage. A photo would be nice with cell phones today, and a description of what happened. And if you make sure that if you need to write a paragraph or a page, 2 years from now, you may need to refer back to it for your notes. Battery protocol. This looks like a battery from a Phantom 3, maybe Phantom 4. Lithium batteries are dangerous. I just want to meet the person that took a nail gun and shot it in the battery. It had to be someone brave, right? Not me. And I'm sure that it was probably dead, and he's got some fake smoke underneath of it or something. But that's got to be pretty brave to do. But when you're charging your batteries, make sure you follow all the manufacturer charging guidelines, storages, and transportation. I rarely charge one of these batteries and walk away from it. I always want to make sure that it's close by. I've got some old firefighter turnout gear in the garage, and if I've got to walk away from it, I will put my batteries on top of that turnout gear, which is Nomex, and I'll charge them on top of it so it doesn't, burn something up and down below. And still, it's a little risky, but if I do have to walk away from it, that's what I'm doing. So they do make bags made out of Nomex that you can carry them in or store them in. But I would never put a battery like this on your kitchen counter or your couch and charge it and walk away from it. Batteries, if they're going to be stored, they should be stored around 60%, not at 10%, not at 20%. When you're flying, you should always land prior to the battery dropping below 20%. It'd be like a diesel. If you run out of diesel on a tractor, the trouble you got to go through getting it primed back up and all the lines back together, so it's a pain. Well, think about it this way. You'd never want to run out of fuel on a drone. You don't even get close. So for my low battery alarm is at 30%. That's my policy, 30%. And the drone starts landing at 20%. So if it is a flyaway for some reason, I don't want it to continue. At 20%, it's going to stop and start landing. It could be in the middle of a field, in the middle of an interstate, in the middle of a pond, but it's going to start landing. So you use that time. You can override it, especially if you're getting close. But that's some safety guidelines set up. So again, 30% is a rule of thumb on a low alarm. 20% is it's going to start landing. Could cause in-flight fire. I've never seen one, but it could start a fire. And if you're landing in a field, especially in California where it's dry, you could be starting a wildfire, brush fires with it. So limits vary based on airlines. Check your airlines to prior to going to the airport and what you can carry on. But if you're going to be carrying batteries, 1 or 2 or 3 batteries, the minimum needed to be able to do the job. You wouldn't want to carry 12 with you if you got a charger. Take 3 or 4, bring a charger, and then whatever your job you're doing, you can charge them up when you get there. But you'd always want to check those on board. For some reason, they did catch on fire, and they're bad. You want to be up top with you, close to a fire extinguisher. In the belly of a 737, you're not going to be able to get to it. So always check them on board. But again, the notes there, limit your number of batteries that you can bring, and then limit the voltage of the batteries you can bring. Now, if you're flying in emergency services, you might not be able to store your batteries at 60%. You may store them at 100%, and you've got it to start trickling down at 10 days. Most drone batteries after 10 days will start trickling down in charge, just as a safety precaution in case they're put up for months, forgot about, and that way they're not being stored at high voltage. Mine are set up at 10 days to start trickling down. So, 10 days, I got to check them and make sure they're charged back up again, because, if I get a call to do a search and rescue, or I got a car over an embankment 200 feet down, then, I don't have time to go start charging batteries. So it's up to your policy what you can do. It may be that you got 2 batteries at 100% and your other 3, 4, 10 batteries are at 60%. And then if you do have a call, you got 2 batteries to start with, and you can already start charging some of the other ones and getting in from 60 up to 100%. But whatever your policy procedure says, that's what you want to follow. In section 107.39, and you can download this electronic version of these rules, but .39 talks about operations over human beings and what does over people mean. Again, is that this term refers to flying directly over someone or a group of people. For example, Miami Beach, July, want to fly down the beach. I don't know that you'd be able to go down the beach without flying over someone's head, shoulders, legs, arms. It'd just be impossible, and maybe even in the water. So the term says do not fly over people unless they are part of the operation. Now, I first thought this meant that part of the operation was it's my search party. So I got me and my visual observer, and I've got 100 people out in the field, and they're staging, getting ready to go out. They're getting a briefing, and I take my drone and I can fly over that group, and they're part of the operation. No, part of the operation is you and your visual observer or observers, and it's not over searchers or people that are out in the field. So if you've got a search team going on, they've got 3 people and a dog, and they're out there and you're following them, you need to follow behind them, left or right, or in front of them, but not over them. And I'll show you a good example of that here later. But again, flying over people means only your visual observer. I mean, your visual observer is staying there with you saying, okay, further, watch the power lines. And so sucks to be the visual observer if you crash. And what I do, just as a side part here, flying over people, if I'm landing the drone, I never land the drone directly above me. I'm always landing it out to 15, 20 feet. And once it gets down to about 20 or 30 feet, then I'm bringing it over to me and landing. Because you know what? If it's 400 feet above me and I get a bird strike and that thing comes down and I don't react fast enough, my head's going to get dinged. So always just as risk management part, have the drone come down, 50 feet away from you. As you get closer, then you can bring it back to you. Just part of the risk management as you're flying. Directly participating, I think we talked about that. The term directly participating comes back to your visual observer here and your unmanned aircraft pilot or remote pilot. The remote pilot, RPIC, remote pilot in command, is always responsible for ensuring the drone is safe before flying. Now, you can have a visual observer that says, hey, would you mind checking the props and make sure everything's good? But you're trusting that visual observer that they know what they're doing. If something happens and the blade pops off and FA comes to you because it went through the windshield of a bus carrying 5 nuns and they all get hurt or killed, it comes back to the remote pilot in charge. You cannot pass that off to someone else. You are fully responsible for anything that goes on. So that pre-flight inspection, if you want to delegate it, you can, but there has to be that trust and working together that that it was checked, and that's per the FAA. But make sure that it's inspected, and again, the responsibility comes back to the remote pilot in charge, in command. So some practice test questions. When can a flight crew fly over human beings? A, B, or C? Regulations specifically prohibit flying over human beings. Flight is only approved over people with an application made to the National Transportation Safety Board, or only when the human beings are directly participating in the operation or under a covered structure. And the correct answer is C. When the human beings are directly participating, that's your visual observer. And then if they're under a covered structure or a stationary vehicle. If an unmanned airplane weighs 33 pounds, what's the approximately weight would the airplane structure be required to support during a 30-degree bank turn while maintaining altitude. So this comes back to that load factor on the wings of like a fixed wing. So we got to look at the aircraft weighs 33 pounds, and the turn is going to be a 30-degree bank. So we go up here and look at 30-degree bank, and it's 1.154. So I'd take the weight of the aircraft, 33 pounds, 33 times 1.154, and that should give you 38 pounds and some change. Let's say 38.4. If you go to the answers below, A, B, or C, it says 38, and you go, well, you know, this is 38.4. I don't see 38.4. Go to the closest one. We know it's not 34, and we know it's not 47, so C would be the correct answer. According to Part 107, the responsibility to inspect the small UAS to ensure that it's in safe operating condition rests upon the remote pilot, visual observer, or the owner of the bird. Anybody have a guess? You're right. A. A is correct. Remote pilot. When operating an unmanned aircraft, the remote pilot should consider the load factors on the wings may be increased anytime. What happens? A. The center of gravity is shifted rearwards. The airplane is subject to maneuvers other than a straight line or level flight, or the gross weight is being reduced. A, B, or C. The correct answer is B. The airplane is subject to maneuvers other than a straight and level flight. So if you got a straight and level flight, there is no load factor on the wings. Once you start making that turn, those G-forces happen, then it helps start putting that force. So always make sure before you do a 30-degree or 40-degree or 50-degree turn with your fixed wing drone, make sure that you know what the manufacturer says the guidelines are and the maximum turns that can be made with that aircraft. To avoid a possible collision with a manned airplane, you estimate that small UA climb to an altitude greater than 600 feet AGL above ground. To whom must you report this deviation? Air Traffic Control, National Transportation Safety Board, or upon request of the FAA. So thoughts here, was there a collision, or did somebody just had to go to the laundries and have a large cleaning bill that week? A, B, or C? C is the correct answer. Upon request of the FAA, because there was not actually a touch or a collision. But be ready to report it in case FAA does come back to you and says, we need a report on that. A stall occurs when smooth airflow over the unmanned airplane wings is disrupted and the lift degenerates rapidly. This is caused when the wing does what? Exceeds maximum speed, maximal allowable operating weight, or exceeds the critical angle of attack. By the way, for test purposes, FAA doesn't give you videos like this. C, exceeds the critical angle of attack. And remember is that if you're flying a Russian Sukhoi Su-35 or a Cessna, that critical angle of attack is that doesn't matter on the weight, you're going to go down. What effects does high density altitude have on the efficiency of a UA propeller? In this case, we are talking about rotary. So we talked about this, the higher you go up, what happens? And then the lower you get, what happens? A, B, or C? High density altitude. A, B, or C? The correct answer is A. The propeller efficiency is increased. Excuse me. B, propeller efficiency is decreased. My bad. Propeller efficiency is decreased. As you go to high density, remember, the higher you go, the less efficiency your rotor ring will have. We talked about this in an example. Do helicopters typically go to top of Mount Everest and do rescues? No. But our jets, our 737s, 47s, and 57s They all love that high density altitude because with jet propulsion, it allows the thinner air and they can actually go faster versus the drag that they'd have lower down. B, propeller efficiency is decreased with high density altitude. According to 14 CFR Part 107, what is required to operate a small UA within 30 minutes after official sunset, or we say before sunrise, but in this case, sunset? A, B, or C? Anti-collision lights must be operated in a rural area, have the use of a transponder like ADSB. The correct answer is A. According to 107.29, B says no person shall operate an unmanned aircraft during civil twilight unless they've got that strobe that's visual for 3 statute miles. Who's responsible for making sure that it can be seen for 3 statute miles? You, the remote pilot in charge, is responsible for that. And what do you do with that information? You log it in your logbook on a given day. You and your visual observer or someone else checked it, and it did meet that standard. ATC radar facility issues the following advisory to an unmanned aircraft flying on a heading of 360 degrees. Traffic's at 10 o'clock, 2 miles southbound. Where should the pilot look for this traffic? This is a typical FAA question, but also something that you need to know if you're listening to CTAF and you hear this going on. Where would they be located? Where should the pilot look for this traffic? A, northwest, B, northeast, C, southwest. A, B, or C? The answer is A. The pilot is flying at a heading of 360 degrees or north. And they're stating that the traffic and the other area is at 10 o'clock, which means the pilot should look left, just ahead of the left aircraft wings, and look at northwest, looking for the traffic. And you would be required to do the same thing on the ground. If you see this, hear this coming across CTAF, you'd be able to understand and know where to look as well. All about risk management. So in Chapter 5, we talked about flight performance to ensure the unmanned aircraft gravity limits are not exceeded. Follow the aircraft loading instructions specified in A, Pilot's Operating Handbook, B, the Aeronautical Information Manual, or the AIM, or C, the FAA Aircraft Weight and Balance Handbook. This is the center of gravity is not exceeded. What do you follow? And the answer is A. You go back to the Pilot's Operating Handbook. If you're going to remember in the days, maybe you remember this or not, if you had a VCR and the light kept blinking, you go, how do you get that light to stop blinking? I know some of you are chuckling. You go back to the owner's manual, right? Whoever made the VCR, you'd go back and check that. Same today with anything. If you're looking at something on your car and it's blinking, what do? You go back to the whoever made it, whoever is responsible for it is what you go back to look. So in this case, A, Pilot's Operating Handbook. State law, what constitutes the weaponization of a UAS? A, drones for fun, so it doesn't matter what you do. B, by attaching a weapon to the UAS, or C, using a weapon from the ground to interfere with the UAS. What is the state law example constitutes weaponization of a drone? A, B, or C? The answer is B, attaching a weapon to the UAS. You might see them on YouTube, you might see them on social media. Somebody's put a machine gun on a drone and it's pop, 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 and the drone is backing up every time it shoots. That's if it's in the United States, of course, it's very illegal. We're probably seeing this is Russia, somewhere else, third world country that are doing this for grins and giggles. But is it possible that this could happen? Very easily. And this is where something made for good, a drone, be turned into something bad. I hate to say it, but just stay. Flying from vehicles and launching. Flying from a moving vehicle is allowed only from land, water, and the vehicle is sparsely populated in a sparsely populated area. So this is not something that you do downtown Atlanta or Charlotte, but if you're out in the wilderness area and you are flying, then you could actually fly from a boat in the water. And just caution is that if you fly and if you've not had any flying experience on your drone, you can set to return home, a little button. So if you launch out in the middle of the lake and your boat moves 20 feet and you hit return home, guess where it's coming back to? It's coming back to where it took off. So it could get wet. There's a second option there is return back to the controller, and it's a little human there. It looks like holding a controller. So if you say return back to the controller, you'll actually find the signal where your controller is and come back and find you. Now, whether or not it's 100% accurate, that's here or there based on GPS. So moving from a vehicle, if you're going to hit return home and you moved 2 miles, then it's going to go back to where it took off from. So what allows you to be able to do that? You should not be piloting the boat and flying at the same time, and you shall not be operating a vehicle and operating the drone at the same time. You should be either in the back of a pickup truck flying it, and you're going down a road. The drone is above you, and you're flying it, and you're crawling along at 5 miles an hour, to be able to do a search area. But you should not be driving. It would be hard to do this, fly within a car, not unless you're standing up through the moonroof, T-tops in my day, and you're going down the road, in a sparsely populated area, and you're flying it. But just use caution there when doing that. And you should not be doing flying and driving at the same time. When it comes to hobbyists or North Carolina, as far as launch recovery goes, there's no distinction between a hobbyist and commercial pilot. You guys are all treated the same way between state and public lands. Just make sure that if it's Department of Interior and you're launching, you got to get that permission. Registration and damages. We talked a little bit about damages earlier, but here it was in an advisory circular from the FAA 107.2. I want to give you that reference on more guidance when it comes to damages. But also as the drone registration, you got to pay that $5 and get that registration number for all your drones. Good for 3 years. After 3 years, you do have to renew it, and it's $5, and you do get a unique registration number for every drone, and it's FAA Drone Zone. FAA Drone Zone is where you go to register your aircraft. Aeronautical charts. This is information that's key in knowing where you can fly and where you can't fly. So we're going to be using sectional charts. Primary aircraft, is used for aircraft that's navigating through. Looking at this map here, got the blue lines. It tells me here that it's probably some class Bravo airspace, blue. And we all do visual flight rules. We don't do any instrument flight rules. So as a visual flight rule for us, meaning that we've got to keep our eyes on the drone at all given times. But the VFR sectional charts give you information about the airports, the different classifications. Here it talks about where the Class B airspace is, how high you can fly, and about. And if you look at this chart to the left, this is an MSL, 110/25. I call them improper fractions. 110 over SFC, surface is what that means, 110 over surface. Add 2 zeros to that, and it will give you your MSL. So looking at the yellow arrow, add 2 zeros to that, and it would be 11,000 over 2,500. So your ceiling is 11,000, and your floor is 2,500. So what is happening in between the floor and the ceiling? This is where aircraft is coming in, probably landing at this. I see Worth there, so maybe it's the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But they're flying, they're coming in between the ceiling and the floor as they're making our approach into the airport. If you get a little bit closer and you see the 110 with the blue, that would be 11,000 down to the surface. So the air is restricted. You cannot fly in this air unless you've got permission and you're squawking with the FAA, and they know that you're there because of heavy commercial traffic coming in and out of this area. So for a drone pilot, and this tells me that in this area where the blue is, you're not able to fly. You're restricted all the way down to the surface. But over here to the right, where this big 27 is, that 110 over 25, that means that the Class B Bravo airspace starts at 2,500 and goes up to 11,000. So based on this, you should be able to fly in this area your drone because you're not exceeding 400 AGL. So this is an area that you can fly as a drone as long as you don't exceed that. And there's, here's a look like a helicopter spot here, but again, that's just a letting you know that's there. It's not a restriction. So, but it's important for remote pilots to identify locations where you can fly. That would probably be Class G Gulf airspace underneath that, and underneath that 2,500. Now I got some videos, some 3D videos to be able to demonstrate that a little bit easier. But it is a numbers game, looking at the charts. I'm going to provide you some PDFs of some charts if you don't have a big sectional chart. Everybody as a remote pilot should carry, especially if you're working and you're going to be doing any type of search and rescue in North Carolina, you need to have those maps. If you go to your local airport, here it would be Asheville AVL, they're going to sell you a sectional chart for about $10. And then those are actually used for aviation. The state of North Carolina, through the North Carolina Department of Transportation Aviation, they give away free maps, and it's a full size of the North Carolina, the whole state, every airport, all the airspace, private airports, and you can from the airport. I've got some. If you're here close to me, I'll be glad to drop you some off. But I go to the North Carolina Department of Transportation Aviation Division at the Raleigh-Durham Airport is where I pick them up and give them out at class when I'm doing live classes. So it's a numbers game. If you look at the blue and the yellow, we talked about a while ago, this is measured in MSL, means above sea level. That's important not to get that mixed up with AGL, above ground. So means above sea level. Add your 2 zeros, and then the large number in the middle is the 27. Then you add another 2 zeros to that, and that lets you know in this quadrant here that that's the highest point here. So if you're flying across this in a manned aircraft, you've got to be above 2,700 feet MSL to clear any obstacles in that area. And you go, Fort Worth, man, what is down there? Who knows what's up to 2,700? And actually, it's probably around 25 or 26, and then there's a couple of 100 feet added on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on how we actually make up that 2,700 number. But there's probably a radio tower or TV tower, that's down there. Could be something else. Could be, skyscrapers, whatever the case is. But that's the minimum that a manned aircraft would fly over that quadrant, and that'd probably be more like 3,000 to be able to clear anything and everything in that quadrant. So don't hit any mountains like in our area, if you live in the mountains, or Colorado, wherever you live. What's a quadrangle? It's a span of 0.5 degrees lat and 0.5 degrees long. And we'll get a little bit more into that as we go on. Symbols. There's a reminder, if you will go to the left of your screen, you should be able to go in. I think you can do this and be able to blow this up over to top left. Do you see anything there that allows you to be able to go in there and hit a magnifying glass to blow this up? If you can, do that and then blow the map up, and I'll continue talking. Again, add 2 zeros at the end for any MSL altitudes. Here I've got a 20, add 2 zeros. It tells me it's 2,000 feet in that quadrangle. The quadrangle is this dip marks here. If you follow my cursor.
Oh, Wayne?
Yes.
Real quick, like you said, that upper left-hand corner, it says Wayne Bailey sharing content. Some people may not see that toolbar. You have to click on what looks like a piece of paper and a magnifying glass over it. Once you click on that, then it brings out that toolbar. You can zoom in or zoom out.
All right, it does not show it on mine, so hopefully you can see it on yours. Top left, right? Just take your cursor and go up there and it should pop up.
Yeah,
Yes.
you have to click on it first if the toolbar is not there.
Okay. And that way you can blow up and you can look at more detail of what's going on. Here's a 20, here's an 18, here's a 20, 18, 20, 20, 17, 19. Add 2 zeros to that, and that gives you the clearance that you can fly across this quadrant as a manned aviator to be able to fly across this. Now, if you're flying drones from Asheville to Charlotte, you're going to want to know this. So when you set up your flight plan, you don't go below 2,000 feet if you're going to cross this area. If you go below 2,000 feet, there's a chance you could hit something. And to be able to know where it is, the map has got set up here. If you can blow it up, will tell you the different structures, mountains, any cell phone towers. It'll give you all the AGL and MSL of that to be able to clear it. Again, FAA wants us to know this for some reason, and the only thing I can think is one day we're going to be flying these drones across these quadrants, crisscrossing back across the USA. Again, it's a numbers game, adding the 2 zeros to MSL, but here's the quadrangles. If you see it, I'm going to go back and let you look at this red line where the red line is. This is 34 degrees here. This would be 34.30. Then this line would be 35. That's of your latitude. See your 35 top right, 34 here. So think of latitude as a ladder rungs, and you go up. So that's your quadrangles. I'm going to go back one and let you see them here. And this is key, very important to know your lat longs. You're going to have to know these quadrangles. And we're going to talk about the little dip marks in there and how those work. So go back. If you look at that and then look at the red line, you'll see where that is. And the whole world is mapped this way. This latitude that is at 34 degrees. If you follow this to the left, it wraps around the world and comes back. So that whole line will be across the United States. Here's 35. It wraps around the whole world, loops back around, and it stays at 35 degrees. And that's your latitude. I look for the longitude numbers. I don't see them, but we'll get to that later. Here, this is blown up a little bit where you can see it. The maximum elevation figure, and that is the big numbers that are within your quadrant. How do they figure how that works? So with big numbers, and the big numbers would be these numbers here, 18, 20, 18. How do they come up with those numbers? So anything that's man-made, you add 100 feet MSL, you round up to the next hundreds. So you look in here, and if you find something, for an example, we'll look here at Chesapeake. There's a looks like a tower here, and this is set up at 510, and that's MSL. Anything in parentheses is AGL. And how do you remember that? There's a legend, and I'm going to share with you, and that legend will give you like a cheat sheet that you'll have when you test, but also it'll be on all your maps to be able to know this. So here is that everything's MSL. So if this was the tallest peak in this quadrant, here's a 524. There's a 544, but I can't read the top of that. See if he explains it anymore. So we use this as example. 510, that's your highest of your quadrant. And then you round up to 600. If it's man-made, add another 100. So that was 6, that's 700. And then any natural hazards, mountains, add 100, and then another 200 to play it safe. So why would you do man-made 100, and then you have natural hazards, you add 200? In this case is that trees grow, and man-made structures typically don't grow like a cell phone. The cell phone tower don't grow over 2 or 3 years. Once it's put in, it's put in. They don't usually stack on top. But trees grow, and so therefore they're adding another 200 feet. So in this case here is that this 510, this appears to be a tower. It's at 499 AGL, parentheses, 510 MSL, round up to 600, add another 100, and that is makes it 700. So if there was nothing else in that big, you'll see a number here that would say 70. And that's because of the highest elevation here. Here's another one here. I didn't see yet. 1006, 1016. Looks like it's a tower. And if you look at that, is that we'll do it again. The tower, you round up to 1100, add another 100 here, would make it 1200. So there might be a 12 here, big number 12 in this quadrant to let you know that you got to be at least 1200 feet MSL in order to clear this tower and any other structures there. Elevation of airport, figure 20, area 2. Hopefully by this point, everybody has ordered a book from Amazon, and that book will be a green book, which is your testing, review study guide. And then with that, you should have got a red book, and the red book is a testing supplement. And with that testing supplement is that you'll need that to be able to answer the 60-question test that I sent you. Probably a dozen or so test questions. It'll reference back to that red book to a figure. In this case here, what is the elevation of an airport? And you go to figure 20, area 2. And it doesn't have it on here, but if you go to figure 20 in your red book, area 2, in that map, if you are pulling out your red book, in that book, it'll say area 2, 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's usually a red dot with a number in the middle of it. Those are typically not on your aviation charts. They're only there to be able to help you find that airport for test question purposes only. I'll say it again. Those red dots with numbers in them that you'll see, area 2, those are for test purposes only to get you to zero in on a certain part of the map instead of looking at a map for 30 minutes trying to figure out where the answer is. They're going to direct you, FAA is going to direct you toward that map, so it cuts down on the time that you're looking for something. So in this case, figure 20, area 2, if you go to your red book, I think that comes up to, is it Chesapeake? I think it is. Can somebody tell me what figure 20, area 2, you have a red book? I don't have mine out. I've already packed it. Everybody have a red book? Yes? And you go to figure 20, area 2?
Yeah.
Wait, Drummond. Drummond.
So figure 20, area 2 should be Chesapeake.
This is Lake Drummond.
Lake Drummond.
The airport's
I
Chesapeake.
think he wants the airport, which is to the right of 2.
Oh, that's like Area 1 though.
Looks like Area 1.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Well,
Lake Drummond.
1
Lake Drummond.
northeast of.
It says Chesapeake Regional next to the 2 also.
Right. So you're looking probably toward Chesapeake, I think is where it's trying to guide you to. Chesapeake. And it will tell you in the first question, go and tell us the elevation of Chesapeake Regional Airport. Go to figure 20, area 2. What is the elevation of Chesapeake Regional Airport? That's a typical test question. So if you're trying to figure out what that is, then you just go to the airport and then look at it here. If you look at my page and you look at Chesapeake Regional, the elevation is to the left. It says 19. And that would be the elevation. So what does that tell you at 19 feet? 19 feet, what does that tell you?
1900.
If you look over to the left, what do you see here at Lake Drummond? What do you see around Lake Drummond?
Marsh.
Marsh.
Marshes. And if you're going to be on the coast, marshes represent, here's your coast here. So that's very low in elevation. So not only 19 feet, MSL means above sea level, that it's above. So you had a big hurricane come in and is able to push water in there. Chesapeake Regional Airport could be flooded. So that's just an example of using the red supplement book for your testing purposes. And we're going to get a little bit more in detail, but here's just an example how that works. All right, you can go back and mute your microphones. Thank you. So some more board time if you get a chance to be able to blow this up. Victor Airways, they're a V and a number. And if you look at your map here, sometimes you'll see these Victor Airways. You'll see an IR. These are military routes here. But the Victor Airways, you'll see those across your maps. Those are like interstates in the sky for manned aircrafts. That's going to be crisscrossing back and forth. So for Victor Airways, it's important to know is that the minimum altitude, lowest elevation is 1,200 feet AGL, and it's 4 miles on each side of those Victor Airways. And I'm just looking here. Usually I have a handout I'll give in class, and I don't know that there's a Victor Airway on here, but right here it is. I'm sorry, Victor 35. It's southeast, Victor 35. There's your airway there. My cursor's going around it. And so just remember that's going to be, planes can be flying at, manned aircraft can be flying at 1,200 feet AGL and 4 miles either side of that Victor Airway. Okay, 4 miles either way. So if you're down here flying your drone underneath this airway, then you know that plane's at 1,200 feet. You're at 400 feet. What's the difference? 800 feet is the only difference between you and that plane. And hopefully they're abiding by the 1,200 feet. But sometimes you get somebody with grins and giggles that wants to buzz somebody's house, and they get down low. So you know, it might be an issue. So that's the reason why we don't fly above 400 feet. If we were flying 1,000 or 1,200 feet, our drones, and we're near one of these Victor Airways, then you know we could collide with civil aviation. So again, it's important to know what your regulations are. Make sure you're making a note of that. Runway directions. Looking at the different airports here, looking at Sarasota, and the airport that's there looks like a cross. That's the actual direction of the airport. So the one, look here, it's going from, looks like going from the southeast heading northwest. Then the other one is running down from the north, heading down, I'll say that's going to be northeast, down to southwest. So if you look on a map and you see this, then you're going to be in this area, then you know you're going to be at the end of the runway. If you're going to be in the area here, that means that you're not going to be in a direct flight where airplanes may be coming across you for landing or taking off. I mean, they might be, you know, coming in and they're going to be on the downwind landing, but just know that the charts have the airports laid out in the directions that they're coming in. Magenta or blue airports is that your magentas here are your uncontrolled towers, your non-towered, I should say non-towered, and your blue are going to be set up as a manned. If you go and look at Asheville's control tower, it'll be blue. No, it's going to be a blue, and then I think yeah, and Charlotte is blue. Hickory, some others, they'll be blue. So if you see blue or you see magenta, here does not have a control tower operating. Here there is a control tower operating. And then stars, you know, if you got tick marks on it, if you look to the bottom here, you got the tick marks to let you know the star, the beacon, has a beacon on top. This one would be expected, but down here, this is the one that has not got a control tower. Also, it lets you know those tick marks is that there's fuel there, oil, maybe a hamburger, who knows, but also a beacon there to let you know what that means. This parts of the charts that you'll need to know and study. Here's the legend, and the legend is always part of an aeronautical chart. So you will want to study this, and I'm making myself a note to make sure that you got that as part of your handouts. Anybody remember seeing a legend as far as your handouts go?
Yes, we got one.
Okay, study it. There's probably 10 or 12 questions that will come off of this for an example. that you'll need to know. Obstructions. You're looking at these tall towers, tower with a beacon down here at the south bottom. You'll need to know what that cutoff point is there as far as how high the structures are before they go from a small to a large tower. Also here, it's important to know if you can't remember if it's the numbers that you're looking at is MSL or AGL. If you look at the bottom here, the large number, whole number, gives you MSL, and then the number in parentheses gives you HGL, so the above ground level. And then the UC is under construction. Yes?
Hey, that legend is page 1 of the Red Book.
Okay, that's right. Thank you for reminding me that. If you go over to the Red Book and find the legend, and this Red Book comes with the Green Book when you order it. Also, the FAA provides this Red Book at no cost, and there's a link if you need that link. I think I've sent it to you, but if you need the link, you can let me know, and I can you can actually print it. But I'm going to tell you, if you're printing it from home, it's going to be a little fuzzy. You need a high-speed printer to print these in order to be able to see the detail of when it maps. So if you need the link, please let me know. But if you should be at your legend, some of the things here talking about your airports, the blue, magenta airports are here, or to where's the R here? Is that an R? I think it's R. Private airports, helicopter landings. Over here is the airport data. So if you're trying to figure out, what the MSL is of the airport, it'll tell you what the CTAF is. Here's the diagram to let you know all the information that's at each airport. If you need to figure out what the CTAF is, maybe AWOS, all the information is there. So you want to make sure you study that and you're able to recognize it. The cool thing is, the Red Book, you're going to have that in the testing session. So you're going to have, I call it a cheat sheet, you're going to have this legend with you in the testing session. So make sure you're familiar with this. If you go over here to the third column, here's your airspace. We have not yet covered airspace. Class B in the blue, Class C is the Magellan. And then your Class Echo D airspace. And your different things here on the airport. So make sure you study your airspace, how to find CTAFs and elevations of airports, your different airport codes here. They may ask you, what this means, like a G with a plane, it's a glider. But definitely your airspace. And then they'll ask you questions about, is it restricted airspace, prohibited? We haven't covered that yet, but all that information in your legends. So make sure that that is close and dear to your heart. And then here's a directory legend. This is, I think, coming from the airport directory, and it gives you information about the airport. You can pull that up online. Just type in FAA airport directory, and it's an electronic version. Gives you all the information about the airport. For us, if we're flying near an airport with our drone, this will tell us, if they're landing left or right, the layout of the airport, where to expect planes coming in and out. So if we're flying at the bottom left here, we'll be able to know which way aircraft may be coming in. And of course, which way they land is based on, a lot of times, the wind and other elements. So again, the legend, very important. It could be the difference between you passing or failing the exam based on knowing that there's information on this legend that you can go back to. If you're asked, about what's the most comprehensive information given on the airport, and it's the chart supplement. It used to be called the airport directory, and I still call it the airport directory, but it is the chart supplement. So anything that you need to find about that airport, you can go to the chart supplement. Again, it's online. The books are free. You just have to download it. It'll talk about if there's any public airports, seaplanes, helicopter, military facilities there, anything about weather data, any waypoints, diagrams, whatever that you need to know about that airport. A telephone number to call ahead of time, order a hamburger, have ready for you when you land, whatever it is. The chart supplement is going to be the most comprehensive information that you get on an airport. Here's some more common symbols. If you're getting to charts and you're mapping the declination, it says 15 degrees west. Bottom here would be a transmission tower. So as manned pilots are flying, and then they see a transmission line, towers that's going across country, and they see this, and they know they're in the right place. Or if they're looking down and they don't see it, and it's on their map, then they know they're lost. The obstructions here, 1,000 feet or higher, or 1,000 feet below, is the difference between a high profile or a low profile. You have a group of obstructions. There'll be two together. Where you might find a group obstructions, where you might be able to find those group of obstructions. Anybody have a clue? Downtown Charlotte, downtown Atlanta, with high rises, you're going to have groups. If you go to the North Carolina chart, I think that it's here. Let's look. Top right, if you can blow it up. Here's Charlotte. Here's at the top right, you see some group of obstructions here, and that's your high rises downtown Charlotte. Gives you 2. It don't give you 10 or 20. Just gives you 2 and lets you know that there's a group there. If you got a strobe on top, it lets you know it's lit. And then again, this is in your legend, but it talks about the elevation. So if you see this below, for example, would be FAA says 7 miles south of Roanoke, there's a tower under construction. We need you to go fly it. Tells how high you can fly above that tower. And so it'll go in and it'll show you that MSL is 2049, 1149 AGL, and it's under construction. So the 1149 is really for our drone pilots. The 2049 is for our manned pilots because that's MSL. Drone pilots typically are not worried about MSL. They're wanting to know how high it is above ground. So technically, if it's 1149 and it's under construction, I can go 400 feet above it in order to be able to do whatever I need to do. Remember in our previous slides, go 400 feet up or 400 feet to the left or right to be able to get there. But if they say it's a tower 7 miles south of Roanoke and it's under construction, well, you know what? All you got to do is find that UC within that 7 miles, and that's probably the only one under construction. You find the UC, and that's key of knowing that you're at the right tower. So if it says, how high can I fly above this tower? It's under construction. If that's 1149, again, as a drone pilot, I'm looking at the parentheses. I'm looking at AGL, above ground. I would just add 400 to that, and that would be 1549. So I could fly 1,549 feet and be above that tower within 400 feet of it to be able to do that inspection. What I got to be careful is that if I'm at 1,500 feet, am I in class Echo airspace? If I got into another airspace that would cause me to have a collision with another aircraft up there? Typically, you're not having manned aircraft buzzing towers at, below 400 feet, so you should be okay. But you just got to make sure that you're good to go. And it has here, notice here, guide wires may extend outward from the structure. Just know that if it's a tower, it's 1,000, 1,200 feet, and it goes up, you're going to have guide wires. Anybody that's been flying, you see the guide wires. What comes to my mind right quick is outside of Brevard is Rich Mountain, and the Fox TV tower is there. I think it's got to be at least 1,000 feet, and there's guide wires coming down off it. So just got to make sure that you are aware of it. Here at the bottom right, talked about again about the Victor Airways, and just if you see a test question there, it says Victor Airways 85. What's the minimum? What's the airspace there for commercial manned aircraft to be able to fly in this area? It's going to be 1,200 feet AGL. 1,200 feet AGL. Here's another one, Victor 384. And somebody asked me once, what does the number stands for? The only thing I can tell you is like Interstate 40 and Interstate 26. One's going east to west, one's going north to south. The 185 means something, but for us as a pilot, remote pilot, does not mean anything to us. Just knowing that's a Victor airway, and you could have traffic as low as 1,200 feet AGL in that area, 4 miles either side of you. For information, if you're doing a screenshot, flightaware.com, VFR Map, or skyvector.com are some of the links that you can go to be able to study these and look at more. Lots to be able to review. Sectional charts, you know, what a mess. So it looks like my spaghetti when I make it. It's all just all mixed up. Yeah, but you know, the numbers all mean something. How can you remember them? You know, we're gonna be going through those, and also part of your 60 questions. Hopefully everybody got that 60 question study guide. You know, it's not a per se a test, but what it is, it's like a study tool, and you go through those 60 questions, and over the 4 sessions that we have dedicated to going over the Part 107, you should be able to answer those 60 questions. If I've done my job on delivering this information to you, you should be able to answer those questions. It may make a reference to the testing supplement, and I may have not covered go to Roanoke, look 7 miles for a tower under construction. But if you go there and it says go 7 miles, you know, south of Asheville, go 7 miles south of Atlanta, look for a tower, you know, it doesn't matter if it's in Atlanta, North Carolina, or in California, it's still the same technique. Just I'm teaching you how to be able to go and find it. But most of your information that you're going to need is going to be in that testing supplement to be able to guide you through the process. If you're looking for an FAA chart guide for this class, you can go here, and what it does is that it actually, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take and copy this, and I'll put it in your chat, and you can, well, it's not going to let me. Copy. All right, I'll come back to it, and I'll put it in your chat whenever we get ready to go for a break. This chart guide, it's a great guide to be able to go through. It's probably 40 or 50 pages. That's the reason why I don't print it out. But it tells you every single item that's on an aeronautical chart, what it is and what it's for. If you're an overachiever, I encourage you, go read it, study it, and know what it is. And once you see it, you go, yeah, I can remember that. You know, a plane with a G, that's a glider. I can remember that. I mean, it's easy. I just didn't know what the G stood. Was it class golf? What was it? No, it's a glider. So that will help you understand. And also, if I'm not around, you can go back and look it up and see what that is. Like, what is a flag by a lake? What does that mean? It'll tell you in there. Airspace classifications. You know, we talk about in these classes about the upside down wedding cake. And this is a great example of an upside down wedding cake, right? Hate to be my wedding there or anybody's wedding for that to happen. Upside down wedding cake. What does it mean? Well, airspace classification. And if you've printed out the study guide, or if you've got a link to it, that FAA remote study guide, it's on page 5. There's a color diagram in there as well. But there's 4 types of airspace. There's controlled airspace, uncontrolled airspace, special use airspace, and other airspace. So starting with controlled airspace, there's class A, Alpha, B, Bravo, C, Charlie, D, Delta, and E, Echo. And it's shown here in this diagram. Where we're going to be flying as drone pilots, we're going to be flying down here in uncontrolled airspace, class G, Golf. That's down here in the purple. This is where we're going to be flying. If you remember earlier at Dallas-Fort Worth, I said, you know, we could fly underneath that shelf. Here's that shelf I was talking about. Even though the airspace above you is controlled, I could fly down here below it. As long as I'm not in the center here where it drops down to the surface, I can fly. So I can fly this area here without any problems because there's no aircraft that's flying down here. Somebody asked me, why is it an upside down wedding cake? You know, If you got planes coming in and they're coming in at 30,000, 40,000 feet, they're coming in, and we'll say Class B. And by the way, if you're from North Carolina, the only airport in North Carolina that's a Class B is Charlotte. The next closest one is Atlanta. So Class B airspace, you have a plane coming in from 30, 40,000 feet, and it's landing. You know, if you've ever been coming into Atlanta and you're up there for an hour and you're just circling, well, you're circling in this controlled airspace. That 737 is safe as it's circling. And as it gets closer to the ground and it's getting ready to land, it can keep circling if need be, or it can use this to be able to come in. And as you get down closer to land, then all this is restricted, not say restricted, controlled all the way down to the surface. As a drone pilot, you will rarely get permission to fly in this down to the surface area. I only know a couple people have done that, and they've actually worked, in this case Charlotte, they worked for the city of Charlotte. They had to do something for this, so you know the county manager calls over to the airport and says, hey, my drone pilots need to fly this area, can they do it? And they go, yeah, just let us know when they're going to be flying, and we'll be watching for them. And then they put in for the request. But typically, no, that's off limits. If it's down to the surface, those improper fractions we talked about earlier, if it's down, it says to the surface, you're not going to fly. So you need to make other arrangements to be able to do that. So controlled airspace, A, B, C, D, or E. Or uncontrolled airspace, Class G, golf. We love golf. I often say Class G is not really golf, but good air for us to be able to fly in as remote pilots. Airspace classification, special use, and we'll go more in details in these. Prohibited means prohibited. It's not, can I ask permission to fly in here? No, it's prohibited. What's a good example of prohibited? It's usually the Washington Mall and Camp David are good examples of prohibited areas. Restricted, warning areas, MOAs, alert areas, and then the control firing areas. And then other airspace areas we're looking at is MTRs, military training routes, and we have those all over the place. Temporary flight restrictions, parachute jump operations, terminal radar services areas, also known as TRSA, and then national security areas is part of that other airspace. So starting at the top, it'd be good to know this information is for your Class A, that starts at 18,000 feet and goes up to 60,000 feet, MSL. That's where all the big boys fly. Usually they're flying from LA to New York, and they're flying over airports at Class B, doesn't matter. They're in controlled airspace Class A. So as drone pilots, we don't have to worry about ever flying up there unless we start getting into the big guys, and we may get up there. But even the drone pilots in Afghanistan and other areas, they're usually flying 5,000 or 6,000 feet. They're typically not flying at 50,000 feet with drones. So this will probably never affect us. But it's not associated with any airports. As they fly, they're flying over these airports with no issues. Your Class Bravo airspace, you know, they're going to have an air traffic controller. You are going to have to get a waiver if you fly in that area where it's restricted. The general surface, you know, is usually around 10,000 feet MSL and usually extends out 30 nautical miles. And you'll see a ring around an airport. Charlotte is a good example. If you look about 30 miles out, you'll see a gray ring that goes around. And that 30 nautical miles is to let aircraft knowing that they're coming into the area, hey, stop. Well, not really stop, but don't come in this area unless you're pinging or you're talking to air traffic control, because there's some heavies in there flying around, and they want to make sure that everybody stays separated. But it is airspace that's the most busiest. That's your Atlantas and LAs that are flying, Miami. And they are usually controlled by 2 or more layers of that wedding cake we talked about a while ago. Solid blue, 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 blue. Blue, I said, is busy. If you can remember that, blue is busy, 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 blue. And then remote pilot operates an aircraft in Class B. They've got to get that prior authorization from ATC. Now, they're not going directly to air traffic control. They're using those third-party apps such as AirMaps, Kitty Hawk, to be able to go in and file for that waiver to be able to fly. Class C, Charlie, that's at magenta. if you're familiar with like an Asheville or Savannah, those are solid magenta colors. They have an air traffic controller, usually from the surface up to 4,000 feet. If you can zoom in on this map to the right, this says here surface up to 4,100. And then you come out just a little bit and it starts at 1,300 and goes up to 4,100. So we can fly in this circle here, but we cannot fly in this area. If you're going to fly in this area here down to the surface, you're going to have to get approval through LAANC, the Low Authorization Notification System. You're going to have to get permission to be able to do that. But typically these are in medium-sized cities. Solid magenta line. Never knew what magenta looked like until I started messing with these. The remote pilot, when operating at Class C, gets that prior authorization from ATC before coming in. And that's usually done within seconds, not minutes, not hours, not months. 2 years ago, if I had to fly in this area where it's down to the surface, I had to do it 90 days in advance in order to get that permission. And it was only for an hour or two, so you hope the weather didn't suck if you're going to go in there and fly. But today, it's within minutes, seconds that you're getting that, and it's coming to you as a text. Class D Delta, it has air traffic controls. You do have to have a waiver when you're flying in the airspace. If you got a question, just open up the mic and let me know. I can't see anything with chat going on right now. Generally, surfaces 2,500 feet MSL and extends out 5 nautical miles. See a blue dash. And if you can't remember what that blue dash is, you go back over to the legend. The legend's going to tell you what Class D looks like. That's your cheat sheet, remember? If you got a negative number or a blue dash here, if you got a 25 in this case, I think in North Carolina, I think Hickory has got a bracket around it. So that means there that at 2,500 feet MSL down to the surface, you cannot fly in this area. This outer ring here that you see, that's a compass rose. Has nothing to do with airspace. The center, this blue dash, Class D Delta airspace. This is Elizabeth City. The bracket tells you from 2,500 down to the surface. Now, if it's a negative number, if it says a negative 25, then it's from the surface up to 24,000. 2,499, 2,499, 2,499. And then at 2,500, there was probably a Class C or a B surface that starts up. So remember, minus, it goes from the surface up to 1 foot less than what's in the bracket. This is a 2,500, so it would be 2,499. And just remember, at 2,500, you're probably going to run in some Class B. You see this in Orlando, down around Disney, in that area where you get airports that their airspace, controlled airspace, crosses over with each other. But for us, drone pilots, no worries. We cannot fly when in this Class D Delta airspace unless we get permission to do that. They are the least busiest airports. May even be part-time. These Class Ds may only operate from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then after 7 p.m., it reverts back to Class Golf airspace. The air traffic controller may be closed on Saturday and Sunday. The tower may not be active. If that's the case on Saturday and Sunday, it may revert back to a Class Golf airspace, and you can go and fly and not worry about it. But the only way to know for sure is, and I've tried doing this, I've tried calling the airport manager, says, can you tell me after hours what your airspace is? During the day, it's Class D. What is it on the weekends? And they go, I don't have a clue. So even the airport manager doesn't know. So you go to that chart supplement or that airport directory, and it'll tell you what the operating hours is in that airspace when it is. So that way, if you're doing a real estate job, you might not be able to do it Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but you can go down on the weekend and do it and be able to make it. Here's another interesting thing, and we're getting ready to cover what this is. This dotted line here that comes off to the side, and that's going to be our Echo airspace. So no operating or part-time control towers. We just talked about this. Again, is that you may be asked a question, is that airspace at an airport with a part-time control tower is classified as Class D airspace? only when it's associated control towers is in operation. So outside here, it could be class E or G, and as I find out, E starts at 700 feet and goes up. So we could fly in class E echo airspace because we're not going to exceed that 700 feet. More to come on that. I saw this as a question, so I threw it in. A non-towered satellite airport within the same Class D airspace as the designated for the primary airport requires radio communications to be established and maintained with the satellite airport, associated flight service station, or the primary airport control tower. I'll say it again. As a non-towered satellite airport, well, I don't know any satellite airports near me, but if it is a satellite airport, what you do is that the primary airport control tower, it's the same airspace. So if you got a satellite airport, it's going to be the same as the primary airport. Okay. There was a question earlier that came out, and I don't know that I can open it back up, and that is the aircraft was flying. I think they were at the area, if I can bring this up, I think the plane was here, and it was 2 miles heading for runway 36. So if it's coming downwind, left and end, where would the aircraft be located? And it would be in the northwest, I think. Is that right? Talk to me. This is what we're talking about in chat.
Concur, northwest.
Okay. So it was 2 miles out. Where would you be looking for the aircraft coming in? And this is the bird here. So it would be here. So my bad. It is northwest. Talking about Class E Echo airspace, there is no air traffic control in Class E airspace. This is typically an area in a rural area, but it could be a lot of traffic. You might have race car teams flying out of Class E airspace where an airport is located there. Some people call it the most confusing. It's a dashed line, and it's from the surface up to 18,000 feet MSL. And you can see here the dashed line that goes around. Sometimes you see Class D and Class E airspace together, Delta and Echo mingling together. But it is between the dashed lines and shaded line. It's 700 feet AGL and up to 18,000 feet MSL. So under 700 feet, you would be able to fly your aircraft. Here you've got your dash line and then the shaded line. Here is your dash line. And we're saying, the dash line is surface up to 18,000 feet. But you get in the shaded area. You also see this around Asheville Airport. You see this shaded area. And I call it a faded magenta. Some people call it other things, but I call it shaded or faded magenta. So if I'm in this area right here, then I can actually fly. It starts at 700 feet where this shaded is. Starts at 700 feet and then goes up. So here, I'll say in this area, top left here, I can fly. I can fly here. I can fly here. I can fly here. But here, I'd have to get permission within a dotted magenta. This, remember, on your cheat sheet, that's on your legend, all this information is on there. So if you get confused what the shaded magenta is or the dotted magenta, it's on your legend. Remember this big blue line here, that's just a compass rose. So it gives the pilot, when he leaves out, which direction that he's flying. Has nothing to do with airspace. If no airspace is depicted, then Class C base is at 14,500 feet, which is rare to be able to do. And then the waiver is only required when operating within a dash magenta. Dash magenta is the only time that you need to get permission using Lance, going through Air Maps or Kitty Hawk. And there's others to be able to get that permission to fly. So here is some maps. Here is Snowbird, MOA, military operations, Andrews, Highland Cashers. So you can see the shaded magenta, see the shaded magenta here. And this map may be off just a little bit as far as being stretched. It might be crunched up. So typically these are perfect circles that go around. Here is a magenta airport, the runway running from the southwest to the northeast. And you can see most of these based on prevailing winds of coming in. Here's Andrews. Again, not a controlled airspace when it comes to air traffic control. It's got a light on it, a beacon. It's got the tip marks on there to let you know that there's fuel and services there available. Same here in Blairsville. Here's one Heavens, private, solid. There's no light, no beacon, and there's no services there. So it's considered private, but it has got the Class E magenta. So if you look at this bottom here at Heavens, since there's no dotted magentas, and this is not the dotted magenta. This is the declination on figuring up your lat longs and your direction and headings. But here, with this shaded magenta, you're able to fly within here. Now, if you're getting close to the airport or flying on the airport grounds, you would need to contact the manager here, airport manager, to make sure that you can fly. But here, there's no restrictions when it comes to airspace. This faded magenta starts at 700 feet and goes up. But again, it just proves to get permission before you fly. Looking over here at Campbell, here you got a star, so you got a beacon, you got services, the airport directions, and here. So this is typically what it means. Just a quick refresher, the 59, 66, you're up here in the mountains of western North Carolina. So for someone to be able to fly across this quadrant, and they want to be able to stay at one elevation, MSL, to fly across, they need to be above 6,600 feet MSL in order to fly across here and clear all obstacles. If they want to clear them all. Here's 6,600, here's 5,900, here's 5,900. If you get on over here closer to Mount Mitchell, moving farther east, then you're going to be up around 7,000 MSL that you got to fly in order to clear. But knowing your maps, here's a MOA. I call them fences, magenta fences. Those are on your legend as well, let you know that there's a MOA, military operations. What could be going on in there? Who knows? But it could be low-flying aircraft, delivering troops, dropping them off, doing some winter training, whatever it might be, to be able to have in here. I don't know how to make it stop. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Yeah. It's a Google call coming in from, and I can't cut it off. There it is. My apologies. I don't know how to silence it. My apologies. So this is a typical of what a map would look like. You got your Victor Airways here, Victor Airways, your fence, Class E magenta. Here's the C we talked about with the CTAF frequency that you'd be looking for. Here's a helicopter pad. This is at Angel. But this H here could be at a hospital. Angel, I don't know what that is. Angel Private, but again, there's a hospital there in Franklin. That's probably what that is. Just looking around. Just be familiar with your charts, knowing where they are. Victor Airways, no more Victor Airways. These are military training routes. We'll talk more about those, the VRs and the IRs. But your Victor Airways here. So, know when you're looking at your charts, the floor of that Class E airspace is going to be, 700 feet AGL. And know that as a drone pilot, you can fly in Class E Echo airspace if you're within that magenta color, shaded magenta color. You can fly without any issues. Fuzzy side is another name for it, the fuzzy side of the magenta. Which is true concerning blue and magenta colors used to depict airports on the charts. The rule of thumb is airports with 24-hour controls towers are in blue. That's your Charlottes and Asheville's and Los Angeles and Atlanta. If there's an asterisk there, it denotes that they're part-time operating hours. It could be they close at midnight and open back up at 6 a.m. And then magenta is airports with no control tower. That way you know that there's no one there to talk to. Maybe an airport manager, but that's about it. Class G, we love flying in Class G airspace. It's all other airspace, we thrive in it. Air traffic control really has no authority and responsibility for this airspace. It's not needed for, you don't need a waiver to fly. And extends from the surface usually up to 1,200 feet AGL. And if you don't see the magenta, Class C usually starts around 1,200 feet AGL. If it's within the fuzzy magenta, we know it starts at 700 feet and goes up. And then private property airspace ownership. So if you look at this map here, is that this is all Class G airspace, right? The fences tell us different stories. The fence tells us here that this is restricted. If you go to your legend and look at your fence, blue fence tells you it's restricted airspace, but you can still fly in it. You may need to get permission because there's probably a military base there and they may be doing some live training, and if you fly your drone through there, that might be a target for them to shoot out of the sky for grins and giggles. But you can fly in restricted airspace. Just get permission, and if you're using the aviation charts, you can usually, if you go in there's a contact information that you can call to be able to find out what's going on. If you're doing search and rescue, you got to jump and run. You've already built those relationships ahead of time, and you know whether or not you can fly or not. And they may just give you permission to fly anytime, but you got to work those relationships out with that area. Whoever that calls it restricted, that base in there, you'll need to adhere to those. Just that's an advisory. And over here, the MOA, whatever that might be going on right there, again, this is all Class G Gulf airspace. And the reason why I know this is Class G, because the airspace, there's no fuzzy magenta, there's no solid blue, there's no solid magenta, there's no dotted blue, there's no dotted magenta. It's all open. Yeah, there's a bunch of fences in here, but this is all Class G airspace. Remember that, important. And I just bring this back just as a review. We saw it earlier. In your Class G, in some circumstances, you may go up to 14,500 feet. It's rare that this happens. Most of the time, it goes up to 1,200 feet. And then what kicks in is your Class E airspace in between. Your Class B airspace here. So if I'm flying down here at this airport here, I can fly because you know what? I'm not going to bump into this airspace where this may be starting here. This might be up at 1,500, 2,000 feet. If I'm down here, I'm good to go. If I'm on this side, I'm good to go. But I cannot fly in this area here because that's going to be down to the surface. Class C, it's usually only one layer it comes up. The Class B, you're going to have multis, usually 3. Class C is usually typically 2 layers. So if you flip that up down, it would look like that wedding cake. If I'm flying in this area at the bottom, that's down to the surface, I cannot fly unless I get permission. But if I'm over here to the left under the shelf, or if I'm over here under the shelf, I can fly because I'm not going to exceed 400 feet, and I'm not going to be able to go into this controlled airspace up here if I'm staying at 400 feet. The Class D, I think of that as a Diet Cola. D for Diet. It's a can. It looks like a can. It looks like a Coke can. Diet Coke can is the way I remember that. And then over here is your Class E, and they call that the shady magenta is that transition area. If you look at airports and you see that fuzzy magenta that extends out, that allows a plane to get down low and be able to come in to approach and still be safe and know that they're in controlled airspace, and no one else should be up there flying unless they're talking or squawking, with the tower. But that's just an overall. Your Class A starts at 18,000 MSL and goes up. MSL, all those are MSLs except here when you're talking AGLs, and usually it's your Class E, because this is where we're going to be flying. in this area down here. We're going to be flying in this Class G airspace. And it's measured in AGL because that's what remote pilots know is AGL. Here's a, refer to figure 26, area 1, identify the airspace over Tomlinson Airport. So if you go to figure 26 in your red book, area 1, find Tomlinson. The question may come up, identify the airspace over Tomlinson Airport, 8J7. So if you notice there the 8J7, it'll also give you the 8J7 beside the airport. What I have found is that there's Savannah Airport and then there's Savannah Executive Airport, and you want to make sure you're getting the right airport when you're looking at your map and your questions. So in this case, if you go to figure 26, area 1, that's 1 with a red dot, that should get you close to the airport, so that way you're not searching all over for it. Identify the airspace. You got to ask yourself questions. Do I see solid blue? Do I see solid magenta? Do I see fuzzy magenta? Do I see a dotted blue? And this is a fence. This is not your dotted blue. If you go to your legend, it'll tell you what that is. That's your restricted area. So if you don't see any blues or magentas in there that's solid or faded, then you know it's Class G airspace. G is in golf, so you can fly this airspace without any issues as long as you get permission from whoever the base commander is or over air ops for this area to be able to fly. Again, if you're doing search and rescue for this area, then you're building those relationships ahead of time to know if you can fly or can't fly. And usually if there's any firing going on, any cannons going off, whatever, they're going to usually issue a TFR or some type of advisory to be able to let folks know, and other aircraft flying over the area on Monday, of next week, we're going to be doing live training, and that lets aircraft that's flying, usually will fly over, lets them know that they need to go around. And as a drone pilot, you can pick that up looking at your TFRs and your advisories is a way to be able to know. When it's an emergency, it may just be picking up the phone call. And if there's someone that's lost in this area or you're doing a search for, more than likely they're going to be involved in it too. So Class G airspace is a correct answer. Surface up to, not including 1,200 feet AGL, is a Class E airspace. And that's a typical test question as well. Class G goes up to Class E, and Class E typically starts at 1,200 feet and goes up. If it's the fuzzy magenta, we know that starts at 700 feet and goes up. Make sure you look at your maps.
Hey, Wayne.
Sir.
Just talking about squawking with the FAA. Are we going to discuss ADS-B or transponders in this class?
Well, yes, we can talk about them. It doesn't apply yet, but we can apply for them. And now's a good time as ever if you want to talk about them. What it is, ADS-B is a transponder, and you have ADS-B in and ADBS out. If you got a DJI product, and it was made after January 1st, 2021, is that it is built with ADS-B in. So if you got aircraft that are near you, it could be at 30,000 feet or it could be at 2,000 feet. It will come up on your screen to let you know that aircraft is there. There's an icon at the top that usually is green. It'll go yellow or red the closer it gets to you. You flip on your map, blow it up, and you can actually see the aircraft, that is in question, that it's crossing over you or around you. But again, at 30,000 feet, you look at it and go, that's a waste of time. But you got to check. But it is pinging, letting you know if it's 30,000 feet or 2,000 feet above you. It's pinging to let you know there's aircraft in the area. As of today, we are not required to be able to ping out. And the FAA does not want us to be pinging out because they don't want the towers having to keep up with us, because there's so many of us. There's more than any fixed wing that's out there, manned planes. So if we were out there pinging, they would be distracted and not being able to keep up with what's going on in the other. But right now, that remote ID they're talking about is supposed to happen in about 18 months. but that's down the road. I encourage you just to keep up with it. I may talk about it today on a 4 o'clock call. Remote ID is something that will, down the road, it may be something that you attach to the existing bird that you have. So it'll just be a transmitter that goes on top of it that will ping. And then after, I think, 2 years or after a year, it's a requirement that if you manufacture a drone, you got to have it built in. And again, that we're talking about 18 to 24 months away. That's coming in. Sorry, guys. Let me let this pass. Questions about ADS-B on what it's going to mean for us as drone pilots, what it's going to mean for us as a commercial pilots. Questions? How about you, buddy? Any questions you have direct about ADS-B in or out?
No, I was going to wonder if I was wondering if he's going to talk about it later on. I didn't know.
And your DJI 300 series, you should have that ability to see ADS-B in, to be able to see aircraft that's coming close to you. Is that correct?
That's right. And both in my 300 and my Mavic Enterprise both have ADS-B in.
Right. But none of us have ADS-B out because they don't want to track it. And I totally understand that until they get some type of plan together for them to track it or not track it. What I see happening is that I see that the ADS-B out will be tracked by law enforcement. And in your case, buddy, you'll have a ray gun that you'll buy, and you'll be able to point it at the UAS, and it'll come back with like a tag number is, Wayne Bailey, 103 Paper Birch Avenue, registration number. He's license expires, a year from now. He's got a daylight waiver. And so it lets you know to be able to keep up. Okay, he's a good guy. He's all good to go. But it could be that if somebody has been doing something stupid, it could be that they put a bolo out for a drone, and you could point that up and go, that drone right there, it's running rogue. We're looking for that guy. And hopefully, the way that's set up is that you'll be able to see a line from that drone down to the controller, and know exactly where that controller is being operated from. But it's my understanding is that only law enforcement is going to be able to that. For me, as John Doe, I might be able to look at it and see it's got a registration number, but I don't think it's going to give a name for competition purposes. If I'm doing a job and somebody goes, man, who's doing that job? I'd like to be able to have that job flying over there. And they go out there and they find my name, and then they start bad mouthing me in social media that I don't know what I'm doing or whatever. Lose my credibility for somehow, because they would like to be able to step in and get that job. So I don't know that the regular public will have access to it, but I know law enforcement, they're talking about law enforcement having access to that information for, to help regulate in case something goes rogue. And if you do have that gun and it flies up there and it's not there, after a certain date, it's going to be required. If not, it'd be like operating a vehicle without a tag. And then you just go back, follow, and find out what's going on. But, that's putting that responsibility back on local law enforcement. And I don't think they've determined how that's going to have. It's not going to be the FAA police coming out. It's going to be, Sheriff's Department, Police Department coming out and making sure that's being done. And if you are operating rogue, you can get a fine and have your bird taken from you. Have you heard anything about that, buddy? Tristan?
I've been paying attention to that a little bit about the Real ID, and I think you're correct. It's just going to be a law enforcement tool where if someone's flying their drone inappropriately or whatnot, we'll be able to locate the controller.
Yes.
I
Hey,
don't know if it's going to be more of a like a radar gun like you're talking about, or if it's going to be web based.
I don't know that yet. It's got to be something that's it can't be expensive, because law enforcement, they're going to have to spend thousands of dollars on a ray gun just to look at drones.
Yeah.
That may be an issue. So whether or not you can.
I figure it's going to be some kind of login system like a DCI system, where you gotta have a username, password, log into it, and be able to see the aircrafts in area or something to that effect.
Right. Maybe an attachment you plug into a computer, and
Yes.
be able to see what's in. If you're doing security and something's going on and you want to know what drones are flying, you can actually put that up, and that's already out there. DJI has a product that you can put up at an airport or anywhere. It's portable, and it'll be able to tell you within 30 miles what drone is flying where.
Charlotte has that system put up now. I know some people work Charmek at the airport, and they have they can tell if a DJI product is flown anywhere near the airport, and it shows them where the controller is at as well. I know they've ran down several pilots or drone pilots and taken their drones.
Right, and probably getting their license taken away.
Yes.
I would assume. Yeah, and that's what it is we've got to have that ability to do that for rogue pilots that are out there drinking their beers and flying, and doing it irresponsible, especially in controlled airspace. So hopefully is that they won't make it too hard for you. Any questions about that? Anybody else? ADSB questions? I don't even know that they make an ADSB small enough to put on a drone that would fly. So I think that's part of the process. They've got to develop that technology to get it down enough to where that can happen. There's some folks out there say they can do it using a something attached to a computer, and you run your controller through a computer, and it'll actually throw out a signal from the aircraft. But I'm telling you right now, FAA does not want that happening right now because they don't have the resources to track it and manned aircraft. Yeah, if I'm flying in a 737 on approach to Charlotte, I want them paying attention to that bird, not the 20 drones that might be flying 30 miles away.
All the ADSB outs that I saw require a large amount of power, and they're usually wing mounted, and they usually replace a beacon light on the end of a wing.
Right. You want to fix it? You talking about a manned fixed wing like a Cessna?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think technology is there yet.
Hungry.
Say again?
They're pretty power hungry.
Yeah. So that's the technology. So again, I don't know that FAA is going to be tracking them, but I know it'll have access to law enforcement to do. But if we get into those 300, 400-pound drones, and they're going to be going from Asheville to Charlotte, bet you FAA is going to be tracking them, and they're going to be pinging. If they're going to go within 30 miles of Charlotte Airport and enter that airspace, they got to be pinging, right? Yeah, they got to be pinging. So that's coming. Hey, I want to set this next one up. This is very short, but it gives you an idea how operating in airspace that might be above you, that shelf that above you, and you're operating underneath that shelf. And this setup is Asheville, and it's a 3D rendering, and I thought it was pretty cool. I'm going to share it with you, and I may even pause it, but we'll start it. And this is Asheville here. It's down to the surface at your Class C airspace, and then your wings out here is this Class E magenta. So I can fly underneath these wings here, but I cannot fly here. This is to the surface. This is up at starting at 700 feet. So this will be a great video to show you how this all works.
Is there audio to this?
There is not.
Okay.
We're back doing silent movies. Now you're looking up. So to the right, it goes all the way to the surface. Doesn't look like it, but that's at Class E, that fuzzy magenta, starting at 700 feet. Let me come back to it. So to the right, that's all the way down to the surface, and then to the left, that starts at 700 feet. That's that fuzzy magenta that comes out. If you're familiar with the Asheville Airport and how that Class C transition airspace happens off to the north and south, that starts at 700 feet. So if I needed to fly this highway here, I can do that as long as I don't exceed 700 feet. So since we're restricted to 400 feet, I can fly this area without any need to be able to call for a flight authorization to ATC. If I get over here under these here where it's down to the surface, then I gotta get Lance and get some permission to be able to fly. Does that help you there? I'm flying here under the shelf. As long as I'm staying under 700 feet, I am not penetrating that airspace there. For some reason, I wasn't paying attention, and I'm flying my drone, and I let it go up above 700 feet. I've just entered controlled airspace, and I could have 737s that are coming across here, going into Asheville, landing, and they're using this controlled airspace here, thinking they're safe. But if a drone penetrates that and pops up through it, then you have just entered controlled airspace. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes this is when the light comes on, where you can fly and where you can't fly, and how these all shelves work. So it could be Class B, Charlotte, and you've got all this blue everywhere, but you get down there and you start seeing where this shelf starts at 1,200 feet MSL, then you know that you can get there and fly underneath of it. So it brings up another question. Let's say that this is Class B airspace, and this starts at 1,200 feet MSL. Well, I measure everything in AGL, right? So you got to make sure that when you're flying up, if you exceed it at 400 feet, you're flying AGL. They're measuring everything in MSL. If you know what the difference is, you could have aircraft flying above you at 1,000 feet, and you'd be completely legal, but you got a plane flying 1,000, 1,500 feet above you because you're at 400 feet. So just got to make sure that they're saying this might be 1,200 MSL. That's means above sea level. Here in the Asheville area, air elevation at the airport's around 2,100. And so if I'm flying at 400 feet up, what is the elevation there versus me flying? So you just got to be careful when you fly them. But typically under these shells, you're good to go. Shouldn't be a problem.
Wayne, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir. Did I lose you? Did I lose you? Hello? Okay, I must have lost you.
Here, I'm back. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep, go ahead.
If we're looking at a chart, our airspace guidance for drones, and let's say Class B, for example, and we've got that cylinder. Huh?
B Bravo?
Yes, sir. And
okay.
That cylinder, it goes from the surface up to 1,200 AGL or 700 AGL. What is generally that diameter? Is it 5 nautical miles?
It varies based on the airport.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Okay.
The 5 miles is a SWAG, scientific wild guess. It could be 3 miles. It could be 8 miles. And so that 5 miles is very generic. If you're within 5 miles of the airport, you need to be looking at your airspace and make sure you're not operating in something that is all the way down to the surface.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. If you're familiar with the Asheville Airport, that area starts somewhere around the Skyline exit, but I don't know that's 5 miles to the airport, maybe like 3 miles, but that down to the surface starts about the Skyline exit off 26.
And I guess we can measure that with, you can order those little plastic rulers from Sporty's, they're calibrated nautical miles and whatever, and just measure it.
You can, but if you get your map and you lay it out and you've got your roadway system underneath of it, there's a lot of electronics out there. AirMaps will let you do that. It'll actually show you a circle or a diagram of where it goes all the way down to the surface, and you'll be able to look at the roads around you and be able to know. So you don't have to manually do it. They do it for you. Go to Air Maps, get a free account, and you can pull it up your local airport and see exactly where that line is, where there's a go or no go to be able to fly. For me, I volunteer at Skyland. I know where that line is. So if I go past that line, I know that I've got to go into Lance and get authorization to fly. Now for public safety, and I'm sure others as well, Civil Air Patrol, Sheriff's Department, if you're operating a DJI product, you can get your controllers unlocked, and they'll allow you to operate in that area without getting permission. They'll actually unlock, because how they control that is the geofencing, and that circle around the airport, your DJI product is grounded. It won't even take off. I'm not sure about Skydio and others, but with DJI, it has got geo-locked. Buddy, have you guys noticed anything in your area with Hickory? Are you guys locked out?
Yeah, we're actually locked out of flying from our own office. I can't, until I got into the qualified, I can't remember what the QEP stands for now, but until I got in that program, I couldn't fly from our back parking lot because of our jail.
Like Quip, right?
Yes, Quip. Once we got in that and they unlocked it, I can fly anywhere. But the jail, the Juvenile Justice Center, which is right here beside us, in the prison, we couldn't fly from that anywhere in that area at all.
Right. And so you should be able to get that. You just takes sending a letter to DJI on letterhead, and the chief or somebody signing it, whoever's responsible, saying, these controllers, I think, is it controllers and the bird serial numbers?
It's the bird serial number. It's not the controllers at all.
Bird serial numbers. And what they'll do, they'll go in and manually unlock those so that you can actually go in there and fly. But they are taking that you are going to be responsible, and you're going to be flying and interfering with manned aircraft, coming in and out of those airports. But they know that sometimes time is the essence. And if you got to get up and you can't get that Lance authorization and you got to get up, then they will actually disconnect that geofencing from your bird. That's DJI. I'm not sure about other Skydio and others. Good question.
Wayne, I put in a link. He's talking about drones getting in the airspace and hitting an aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
University of Ohio done some experiments with a Mooney wing a couple years ago with a Phantom 2, I think it is. I put a link to that video in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, copy, because I don't know if that will stay in there after we leave today. So make sure you go in there and copy and paste it into a notepad somewhere so you can look at it. You want to just give us a quick summary on what it does, what it's doing in the video?
They took a Mooney wing, I think it's from an M20, and they shot a Phantom 2 using an air cannon at 200 miles an hour, which is about the cruising speed of a Mooney 20. And it pretty much shattered that wing. Just a Phantom 2, which weighs, what, 2 pounds?
Mm-hmm.
And that probably would have caused that aircraft to go down.
Yeah. Or cause a serious dry cleaning bill, right?
It would cost a small fortune to repair that aircraft too.
Right, and that's what we got to do as as pilots. We got to make sure that we help police, and I use this generic, to be able to make sure folks that we're flying with are responsible. And you see them, you call them out. So, dude, you can't do that. You can't be flying at night if you don't have the waiver. It's our responsibilities to help with the industry. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I got about 4 minutes till, so I think we're going to stop here. Let me see exactly where we're located. $150. Our goal was to do 141, so we exceeded our expectations. So what I want you to do is just take time to get you a bathroom break, get you something to drink, snack if it need to be, and you should have the link in your chat to go to the 4 o'clock call. Let me set it up for you. Charles Warner, retired fire chief, Charlottesville, Virginia. He is the executive director of Drone Responder. It's a free organization to join. They have, I don't know, 3,000 members worldwide. Even in the UK, the London Fire Brigade, London Fire Department, is a member. So they are a resource to drone pilots. In their library, they probably have 300 documents that you can go to and look at, whether it's policies, procedures. You want to get a COA, they've got samples in there that other people have shared. So it's a library of things. So if you look for something drone related, you just go in there and do a search, and I'm sure there's a paper or article or video or something that's written on it to be able to help you. But they're a resource, and in the future, I see drone responders getting a little bit more organized. They're going to have regions, and let's say in Alexander County, you got a search going on, and you need some drones. You can go through drone responders, find out what drones users are in the area that signed up to be available, and you could probably have 10 drones there within 3 hours to be able to come in and do a search. Instead of being all on you. As the local, you may be air traffic control for the local and be able to say, okay, I need you to search this quadrant, I need you to search this quadrant, and set it up, for them to be able to fly and be the coordinator of it. So that's Drone Responders. It's a great organization. Charles Warner's a stand-up guy, and he's going to be talking and interviewing the FAA, Mr. O'Shea, here starting at 4 o'clock. And so it's going to be worth your listening. Once you're finished with the video, you're done for the day. Take notes, and we'll share those when we meet again. We're going to share what you learned from it, and that'll be part of your, I guess, homework, you'd say, but be able as part of your follow-up to be able to listen and learn.